Happy Friday night, everybody. Welcome to the last April episode of Piano Star Masterclass, brought to you by Piano League. It's so great to see you guys again. I am your host, Brian Lin, a professional pianist and a piano teacher. Ever since I graduated from Juilliard a few years ago, making piano education accessible to everybody has been one of my main goals. And that's why I created this series, the Piano Start Masterclass. Usually, it's a 30-minute talk with a professional pianist, what we call the Start Talk, followed by an hour of real-time piano lessons taught by that pianist. But today, we have a special edition, a Start Talk only edition. Today, during the live stream, you can ask us any questions in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them. But remember, in the future, you can also sign up to be a performer. We have some great classes coming up. There are no more April classes, but hurry up and sign up before the May classes are filled up. Piano Start is all about giving piano students virtual performing opportunities. So besides the masterclass, we also have the Piano Start Showcase, featuring piano performances by young pianists from ages 7 to 12. The showcase will be live streamed on our website on May 1st at 7 p.m. Eastern. Trust me, you don't want to miss any of these performances by these brilliant kids. The performers are already announced on our website as well. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our guest teacher today. He is described by the Republic as a thoughtful musician well beyond his years. His playing is described by the New York Times as alluring and colorful, and by the LA Times as genuinely sensitive. He has performed around the world in solo and chamber recitals, concerto performances, and masterclasses. After winning the 2013 American Pianist Awards, placing third at the 2013 I'd like to introduce you to our Van Cliburn International Piano Competition and being named a 2015 Anna Burke Fellow. Mr. Chen is now a MUSAP artist in residence at the University of Missouri Kansas City Conservatory. As a multifaceted musician, he also transcribes, composes, and improvises. He currently resides in Kansas City, Missouri with his wife, a violinist in the Kansas City Symphony. When not at the piano, he enjoys tinkering with computers and exploring math, science, and programming. And last but not least, he is also a Steinway artist. So everybody, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Chen.
Hi.
Hi, Sean.
Hi. Sorry, I don't know my.
Can you turn on? Yeah, there you go.
Yes. Sorry.
There we go. Right. So for our audiences out there, yeah, Sean is using his desktop, right? So that's why.
It's all a whole big system. Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing, by the way? How are you holding up in this current environment?
It's sort of a blessing for us. I have a new daughter, 8 months old, and so we, my wife and I, we actually get to have a lot of time at home to be with her. So that's the good part of it. And when you're a musician, that's one of the tough things is that you're kind of a freelancer, right? So at this situation, I think it's not just me. Every musician, every artist around the world is finding new ways to share their art, and so that's sort of, we're trying to do the same thing, but it's it could be worse for us. So we're
great.
in a lucky situation. Yeah.
Congratulations on your daughter again.
Thank you.
We talked about this before we went live, but still, that's really quite a amazing thing. Before we get into our topic today, I just wanted to ask you, just for my own curiosity and for our audience to get to know you more. As far as I understood, when you graduated from high school, you received acceptance letters from Harvard, MIT, and Juilliard, right? Those are some amazing schools. I I guess I was just curious how what went through your mind when that happened, and how did you make that decision? And do you think it was a good one?
Sure. Well, let's start first with the first question, which was, how did I make that choice? Kind of, I tell two versions of this story. One is more sensational, more, glorified, and one is more practical. So the glorified version of the story is I asked myself, can I go a day without music, without touching the piano? And the answer was no. And can I go a day without, doing a problem set in math or problem set in physics or whatever? And I said, yeah, I could go a few days without doing that. So, I knew music was a big part of my life. The practical answer was that I actually wrote to Harvard and said, I'm thinking about going to to Juilliard, a professional school, and I'm not sure if I will like it. Is it possible to defer my acceptance 1 year? And actually, they said yes. So if I went to Juilliard and I didn't like it, from what I understood, it was a long time ago. I don't remember that would happen. But also, I thought, music is something that you have to do when you're young. In a way, you can learn stuff, but music, being a musician is like being an athlete. There are certain physical things that are just easier when you're younger. Even like memorizing things, learning pieces quickly, having the time to practice so much. When you're young, you think, when I go to conservatory, I'll have so much time to practice. And then when you go to conservatory, you said, okay, maybe when I get to graduate school, I have a lot of time to practice. And then you get into graduate school and you say, maybe when I graduate and I have a job and I'm out of school, I have a lot of time to practice. And then when you graduate and you're living adult life, you said, man, I had so much time to practice when I was a kid, And so
Gotcha.
you really need to, it's sort of one of those things, and just like athletes too, you have to dedicate a lot of that time continuously. I think for me, I didn't, I got into Juilliard, that's great, but I knew I wasn't super top of my class. I had a lot of work to do. So I knew if I went to Juilliard, I gotta really focus and work really hard. I can't do any of that double major stuff. I knew I was good at academics, but if I wanted to do music, I really needed to focus on that. So that was sort of, I thought, try that first. If you get an undergrad in music, you don't like it, you want to move to something else, that's fine. It's just an undergrad degree, and you can, maybe take some courses, some pre-med stuff, then you can do medicine, you can do, I have a lot of friends, I'm sure Brian, you do too, a lot of friends who graduated Juilliard undergrad and then go on and do, study something else for graduate school, completely fine. And they're doing great. So I think in a way, I thought that makes more sense than if I went to Harvard for 4 years, didn't practice much piano, decided after 4 years, no, what I really like to do is piano. That's a lot of time wasted from my point of view, when I was thinking back then. So that's sort of the practical answer I have for that.
Gotcha. Sean, your video is actually cutting off a little bit. I heard everything you said, audio wise. So can we try maybe stopping the video and turning it on again? Maybe that would help. Right. It's strange because before we started, it was crystal clear.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. Maybe the amount of connections, but
Gotcha. Okay. You're back. Okay, cool.
okay. Yeah, I'm still a little choppy. I don't know why, but
Right. It's
okay.
okay. We can, as long as we can hear you. The words are very clear. Okay, so wow. And then what about the second part of my question? Do you ever think about whether you made the right decision or not?
Uh, yeah, more when I was a little younger, when you're still in school and you're doing competitions and things
Right.
aren't going well,
Mm-hmm.
that's a big thing that, you think about, like, maybe did I do the right choice? Did I make the right choice?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's not so much. I think when you get older, you realize like everyone has so many different paths they can take, and, I don't think it's good to live with regrets regardless of what you really think. But, in a way, when I went to Juilliard, I discovered my interest in computer programming by taking stuff at Columbia, just on the side for fun. And so actually that has really taken off. I don't know if I would have found that interest if I went to the other schools. Maybe I would have, maybe not, but you don't know. So, but that, these days when I think, oh, if I really need to make money, maybe I should just, get a programming job. And, if it comes down to
You
that
still
one
could,
day, then
right?
yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Just disclaimer. I also went to Juilliard with Sean, and that's how we met each other. And from speaking from my own experience, it was wonderful. I learned a lot, from the teachers and also from my colleagues. So we have limited time, so I want to just
Sure.
I wanted to ask that question to get that out of my curiosity, just to fulfill my curiosity.
Yeah.
But so let's jump into the topic today, which is about piano sounds. So you mentioned to me
Right.
when we were discussing what to talk about today, you said you see a lot of people playing the piano in a specific way, in a binary way. I think that was your word.
Right.
Can you elaborate for us a little bit on what you mean by binary and why do you think people do that?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know what binary is, it actually comes from, computer science, where bits either on or off. So it's either, like when I hear a lot of pianists play, for example, with the pedal, they either put it down all the way or it's completely dry. Same thing with the soft pedal. They either put it down all the way, the left pedal, una corda, or they don't use it at all. And there the wonderful thing about piano is not digital. It's not just on or off. There's so many gradations. And yes, it's different for every piano, every situation. But I think as pianists, we need to explore the entire range of the piano, not just, an on and off. So those two big things, the right pedal and the left pedal, using your feet, not, when you drive a car, you don't just floor it and then or not use it. You use gradations of it based on what you want. And as a pianist, as a musician, when we're younger, we do what our teachers tell us. We do what's on the score. When you get older, you start having a lot of opinions. When you learn a piece, you start from not necessarily what somebody's told you or how somebody else plays, but what do you want it to sound like? Once you have that idea, then when you practice, it's not about, oh, I got to practice this, make sure the notes are correct. That's true. But what you're really practicing is how to make it sound exactly the way you want it to sound. Not some idea of perfection, that's hitting all the right notes and doing all the right dynamics on the score. Yes, you pay attention to what's on the score. You want to hit as many right notes as you can. But it's about how it sounds and as a package, as a whole thing. So we can start with actually the right pedal. I'm sure you've thought about, and your teachers have told you, for all the students listening, about half pedal, maybe. And that's good. That's a good idea. I can demonstrate a little bit and I'll play.
Sure.
If you have full pedal, and if you have half pedal, let's see. Kind of you get the articulation. You get the articulation, but you still get a resonance. It's still in a space. Now, so that's fine. You learn about that. You can also do any gradation. You can do 3/4 pedal. You can do 1/4 pedal. There's so many things. So what I would actually suggest students do is to sit down and play, one chord or one note over and over again with different amounts of pedal. So that sounds like there's no pedal, but I'm actually pressing down just a little bit. I don't know if you can hear that slight echo at the end.
Yes, the audio is actually perfect. Yeah, I can hear very well.
Okay, a little more. Now we're getting somewhere. And then we're about full pedal now, but there's a lot of gradations. So that's one thing. Let me change back to my voice mic. That's one thing about pedal gradation. The other thing is when you change. Okay, I hear too many people change like this. The change
Right.
pedal, okay?
Right.
So one thing is don't release all the way. And not only can you not release all the way, you can also change different speeds. So the first time I played it, when it was very choppy, I changed quickly, and you can hear. Let me switch that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can hear in the piano that sound, and to me, whenever I hear somebody play and I can hear that sound, that turns me off for some reason.
Definitely that
Yeah,
makes sense.
so let me do something. I don't know if the video is good enough for me to do this, but
it's good for now. Yes.
so let's see if I can get a better angle. If you can see, you can change very slowly, or you can change quickly for a cutoff. So
Right.
let me demonstrate even more different sounds. So let's say you have a forte and then a piano, right? But Beethoven writes a lot of these, right? And so we can change different ways. We can change slowly. We can change quickly. But you have to watch out. You have to watch out when you change either quickly or slowly that it sounds the way you want it to sound. If there's any notes left over, you have to think, okay, maybe that was too fast. And if you change too fast, sometimes the resonance of the piano is still there. So maybe you have to actually take a little bit more time, and you have a clearer sound. So the speed of sorry, just to recap, not only how much pedal you use is gradation. Change mic. Not only how much pedal you use, but how much you change, whether you change just a little bit, a little half change, or a full change, or any gradation in between. Flutter pedals are good. I'm not a big fan of flutter pedals because it makes a lot of noise, but it's a technique, and everyone should at least know that it's possible. And the third thing to do gradation is how fast you change your right pedal. So it's everyone is personal. When you're starting out as a student, it's hard to know. It's hard to know what sounds good, and we have to listen to our teachers. But I encourage all of you on your spare time when you're practicing to try different things with the pedal, so you can build up a knowledge, a repertoire for yourself about what different pedaling techniques sound like for the right pedal. And I would also maybe add that even if you're playing staccato and short notes or short passages and crisp things, you should also still use some pedal. So if I were to play, staccato passage, that's no pedal. You can add just a little bit, or even like an eighth pedal. It just you make the piano come alive. There's a lot more sound going on, as long as it doesn't sound like unless if you're playing Debussy or playing impressionist music and you need that effect, it's different. So that's my little thing on the right pedal. Left pedal. Just to recap, I don't know if all of you guys know how the left pedal works, but you can see on the keys actually. So if I show you here and I press the left pedal, I don't know if you can see the keyboard moving a little bit. Yeah?
Yes.
So it moves the entire keyframe, not keybed. The entire action, it shifts it over. What that does is, you have a hammer generally hitting 3 strings. And if you shift it over, it starts to only hit 2 strings, right?
Right.
Back in the day, in the old days, it's called una corda because una means 1. Back in the day, it shift over to 1 string, right?
Right.
That's all fine. The problem is everyone uses it, well, not everyone. So many people use it binary, either on or off. You get grooves on the off position, which means that you've used the hammers a lot. It gets kind of hard there and you get a brighter sound. And they've used it so much fully shifted, you also have a hard spot when you press 2. So you don't actually get any una corda sound when you move it. So and this is the same thing with the pedal. I would encourage you to play one note and slowly press the left pedal down if you're on a grand piano. You will hear it's not, on my piano it's not so obvious, but when in person, you will hear different in sound. And if the piano is not well regulated or the hammers are old, you will hear it's bright, it gets softer in the middle, warmer, and then it'll get bright again when you get to full shift. And so that's one thing to note if you're saying playing competition and you're on stage and you use the soft pedal. Oh, it's ugly. Let off a little bit. You'll be surprised.
That's very
Brian,
interesting.
did you have a question?
Yes, that's very interesting because you said that I've always thought, three strings and two strings, so that's just two options. But you are saying that there is actually more than just the three and the two strings. There's, I guess, 2.5 strings. Is that correct?
Right, and the amount of strings does make a difference. Don't get me wrong. It's not a negligible effect, but you will run into issues where you shift it, and not only is it thinner sounding, it's also too brittle sounding. It sounds tinny, it sounds metallic, and that's where you get that problem. And I recently listened to a masterclass by Fabio Bedini, and he says you should always be, he's talked about this exact thing, and it's not a matter of never use an accorda when you want to play soft. It's more, you should always think about how much left pedal you want to use. The answer can be 0, but it could possibly be a little bit, even if it's a forte passage. It could possibly be none, even if it's a super soft passage. It's all about the color. It's all about how it sounds, and knowing, having your feet be really in tune with your ears. My former teacher in high school always asked the students, what part of your body plays the pedal? And most students say, oh, your feet play the pedal. And he goes, no, your ears play the pedal. You should always listen to the sounds that are coming out when you're using the pedal. It doesn't matter, any pedal, whatever pedal. And so that's the left pedal. And just to round the pedal talk off, let's talk a little bit about the middle pedal. Now, if you don't know what the middle pedal does, if you play some notes and then you put the middle pedal down, then you release your fingers, only those notes will be held. So I can play a scale. So only those notes will be held.
Just to be clear, that's only on the grand piano. That's not
that's only on the grand piano. Right. And actually, I had a Yamaha upright growing up. That was an older version and a pretty tall one. And that one had all 3 pedals that were the same as a grand piano. So that's really interesting, but I don't think they make them like that anymore. Anyways, so fine, they hold the piano. What sounds weird is if you use the middle pedal, but you don't use the right pedal, right? So one more time, and then, okay? What sounds better is this. Instead of, it sounds awkward. It sounds like 2 different worlds. You have one world that's atmospheric with lots of reverb and space, and then one that's really closed and tight, unless you're playing a modern piece that asks for it. But if you are playing something like Ravel or Debussy, where you really want that bass note or bass notes to carry through, because Debussy and Ravel needs a little bit of that color in there, you don't want to play the rest of it dry. It sounds weird and it doesn't sound organic or natural. So you don't have to use the middle pedal, but if you're using it, I would ask you to think about what are you doing with the other foot. Yeah. So that's the talk of the pedals.
Right. So just to follow up on a couple points, I think there was a lot to unpack there, but we can't.
Yeah, sorry, it went fast.
Yeah, but you mentioned that there are not only going down, there are gradations. I'm talking about the right now. I'm talking about the right pedal specifically. Not only when you go down do you have gradations, but also when you come up. So I was wondering, I'm also asking this for the students and audience, how do you decide what type of what type of gradation to use, and if it's just listening, are there ways that you can, I guess, train yourself to be a better listener
Sure.
for those? Yeah.
So kind of one of the most elementary things about pedaling is you don't want to, with exceptions, you don't want to blur harmonies that are incongruent or chromatic, right? So if you're playing chromatic scale in a, not fast chromatic scale, but let's say there's a melody that's like, that doesn't sound good with a lot of pedal, right? But if it's too dry, okay, that's fine. You know, that doesn't, it sounds clear, but it doesn't give you that creepy feeling, right? So in this case, what I would suggest is to kind of combining multiple ideas. Don't use entire pedal. Use, when you push the pedal down, only go halfway or something. You know, we can adjust, we could experiment later. And then every next note with the chromatic, you pulse your foot a little bit. So you get a little bit of release, but again, not all the way up. So let's see. So that's one way when you're thinking about legato, for example, and let's say you're playing chords that need to be legato. Now, if you change too fast, we can hear the gaps in between. Since we want it to be connected in a legato way, one of the ways is you have a little bit of overlap. So not only are you changing a little bit slower, but you're actually changing later. You're gonna play the next chord, then slowly change. So faster, I mean, I'm just playing random chords, but now I happen to also be phrasing my top voice, and so it sounds nice that way. But so legato. If you want staccato, now imagine if you want to play staccato and you want a little pedal on every note, you're not going to go down all the way. There's not enough time for your foot to move that fast. So what you would do is you would hover around. So before I say where, almost every piano, when you put your foot down, there's a little play, right? It's very light.
Right.
And then you start to feel it get heavier, and that's when the dampers come out. I like to rest my foot around that location before the pedal comes up, but I mean before the dampers come up, but just hover right there. Because if your foot is off and you want to use pedal, you gotta, it's like a lot of distance, and then you hear tapping where you don't, when people wear shiny shoes, you know, hard bottom shoes, you get tapping. You don't want to do that. So you rest just where the dampers are going to pick up, and you're just going to ba, 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 ba. Now here you want to do fast, because if it's a staccato thing, you want it to be faster, but you don't want to use too much of it. So, you know, if you want a little bit more pedal, let's say you have a slur with dots under them, okay? So now I'm combining a couple of things. Again, I'm changing slightly later. If I were to draw out my pedal, it would sort of be like this kind of feel. So you know, again, these are opinions or I guess solutions that I've built up over the years. I've tried many different things, and now that you're asking me that, I can say this is what I recommend for certain passages. If you're playing legato, change later, change slower, and you don't have to change all the way, but also don't use all the pedal. If you're playing staccato, short, again, not too deep of a pedal. If you're playing portato with those things, it could be a longer pedal, a smoother kind of change. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's things like that. Releasing notes. Let's say you're playing, right? You have a big finisher. Let's say there's different ways a piece could end. Let's say it's a more maestoso piece. You want the pedal to release nicely. You want it to be a slow release. But if it's a very virtuosic, flashy, like kind of dramatic, then you might want, you know, like a cutoff kind of thing. So again, it's, you know, tied to what do you want it to sound like. What do you and you have to use your imagination. You have to try different things. You might have an idea that this will work, and then you try it and it doesn't work. Then you learn from it, and you try different things. But yes, that's if I could give a few examples of pedal situations for the right one, what to use when, that would be what I would suggest.
And those are very useful and very, very clear and easy to understand examples, I think. Sounds like it takes a lot of skills though when you need to, get the control that you want. Is there ways where you can practice the pedals, or like are there pieces that you practice the pedal with, like the actual control of it, not not how it sounds?
That I think the only way to do it, to practice it, is to actively be listening to it while you're practicing. So one of the most important things my teacher at Juilliard, Jerry Lowenthal, told me when I first started studying with him, he says, I asked him, how do you practice? What can I do to make my practicing better? One of the things he said was, do not practice your musicality separate from your notes. Music is not separated into musicality and notes. That doesn't, you will have to practice everything together. So if you're doing slow practice, unless you're, okay, I get it. If you're worried about notes clarity, you want to hear exactly what notes you're playing, fine. Don't use pedal, just do it dry and listen to it. But even when you're doing it slowly, you should try to be exploring and experimenting with the pedal and seeing how you can make it sound the way you want it to sound, just slower. So you have to practice that while you're doing it slowly. I also suggest taking either old pieces out or sight reading, easy to read stuff, and focusing more on, because it's easy to read, you don't have to worry about the notes. Focus on the sound, focus on the pedal, focus on your legato, your phrasing, your timing, all that stuff. It's good to work on pieces sometimes that are super easy, but that you can really work on music. I just said don't practice your notes and musicality separately. Now I'm suggesting you do it, but I think you free up your mind to think about the things that you want to work on. So that's kind of what I would recommend. And then the other thing is, when you're performing on stage, I know this will take a while, because it took a while for me to get to that point. But you want to get to a point where you can play on stage and be listening to the sounds coming out of the piano and absorbing that and reacting to it. So let's say you play something and it's a little too much pedal. You can hear it and immediately adjust a little bit, because there's actually no way to know if you practice on this piano if it's going to translate to being on stage to be the right way. There's really no way to know unless you've played in that hall. You know how that piano, and you know how many people are going to be there and how much they're going to absorb the sound. Unless you know all those parameters, you're going to have to go in and be flexible. So, as a musician, we can't really practice one way of doing things. We have to practice our skills. We have to practice our adaptability. We have to practice, if I make a mistake here, can I keep going on? If this note is too loud, can I play this? If this piano is too heavy, can I adjust to that? If the orchestra is too loud, can I adjust to that? We have to, it's actually, so much of practicing piano is not about practicing one way of doing it. It's about making sure you have all your bases covered and that you are able to do things differently if you need to. Build up your toolbox. That's why I tell a lot of my students, you want to build all your tools. What I say, what your other teachers say, what other Masterclass teachers are going to tell you, even if it's not something you agree with 100%, even if it's not the way you were taught to play, listen, try it out, put it in your toolbox in the back of your head. One day you might try it and say, actually, this is a really good idea. Or maybe you'll say one day, try it like, nah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's fine. But I want you to, keep an open mind and listen to the way different people play things differently, because that's how you build your opinion. That's how you build your toolbox. That's how you build your technique. That's also how you build your musical taste. So that's kind of, my music philosophical spiel.
Understood. Wow, good times always pass really, really fast. We only have a few minutes left. We're already in the Q&A session. Would you like to take a couple questions? There are already a couple.
I'd be happy to.
Or would you? Okay, all right. Chewbacca 90 asked, how do you decide whether to follow pedal markings in scores or not?
I think it depends on the composer. We know Beethoven was pretty clear about when he wanted you to hold down the pedal and not change. He writes sempre ped. But if you read accounts of Beethoven's playing, his playing was messy. His piano was loose and resonant. Those old pianos back then, they have lots of noises. And I don't think you should ever play Beethoven unless you're going for a specific effect in a specific place. But in general, I wouldn't do something without pedal at all. You should always be thinking about, how can I add a little resonance to this? How can I add a little resonance to that? Even in pieces where the composer writes senza pedal, like the Ravel concerto, in the ba-da-dee-dum. Now, I got the effect of senza pedal, but I was using pedal. Just very little of it, just a little bit to connect the legato notes, just to make sure that it doesn't sound dry, just to make sure if I'm on stage in a big hall, I can still project and get the piano to resonate. So I would say, look at, when you see pedal markings, consider it seriously. Think about, why does he write that pedal marking? If it looks like the publisher just put pedals every measure and change it at the end of every measure, maybe that's not so important. But if it looks like the composer deliberately put something on an offbeat, or it's a long pedal that goes through a lot of different harmonies like Haydn does, maybe that's an effect, So you have to use your judgment a little bit. And the more music you listen to, the more pianists you hear play, you'll build an intuition of it. But I would say consider it seriously, but always use your mind, use your best judgment there.
Gotcha. So it sounds like if it's something that looks like the composer meant it on purpose, then try to follow it. But if it's common sense, use your own judgment.
Right.
Gotcha.
If it sounds bad, it's probably wrong.
Right. So yeah, one of my former professors, Joseph Kallenstein, once told me, don't play with your eyes, play with your ears. So again, it's along with the same ideas. Don't just blindly follow everything. All right. So it's already 8:40, but do you have time for just one other question? All right.
I have time for a few more. I'm not in a time constraint, so.
Great. All right. So Miranda asked, Sean has a very impressive experience with competitions. Can he tell us more about his typical preparation process for them? So I guess, a question about piano competitions.
Yeah, good. So this is a long, couldn't be a whole presentation on itself. What I will say to summarize before I go into specific is that competitions are sort of like a game. You have to figure out, for all you kids out there, if you play RPGs or any, strategy games, each character has its own strengths and weaknesses. You imagine yourself as a character. You have your stats. You have what you excel at, what you're not so good at, what you need to prepare for in certain different ways. So you have to know yourself well. And the only way to know yourself well is to do competitions over and over again and trial by error, trial and error. So I, throughout the years, learned what pieces worked well for me at competitions when I got good feedback from judges. I knew this piece I play well, they like it, the judges usually have a good reaction to it. I know there's certain pieces that if I played, the jury either doesn't know what to think or they don't like my interpretation of it. That I also figured out ways of preparation in terms of mental practicing away from the piano, kind of visualizing the score, visualizing the keyboard, especially the night before I play that round. That helped me a lot. If it's a huge competition with a lot of repertoire, I kind of ended up doing a kind of reverse practice. So I'll start maybe like 3 weeks before the competition. I will start with the final round, make sure I can play through the piece, that it's okay, then go to semis, and then get there. And then by the time the competition starts, I'm working on the first round. And that way I'm not stressed out about the later rounds because I know I just practiced them. They might, you still have to bring it back fairly quickly, but you just did some work on it. So it's fairly okay. So that's kind of my strategy. But the other thing is know what you need to eat before you play. Whether you want to eat or you don't want to eat. Do you want to have a banana? I have a friend, Stephen Lin. I'm sure a lot of you know Stephen Lin. He had a regimen of, I forget what it was, like one banana 1 hour before he goes on stage, and then another banana 30 minutes before, something like that. And whatever works for you, even if it's placebo, even if it really doesn't do anything physiologically, but mentally it gets you in the mode. So you want to control things you can control. Don't worry about things you can't control, because you're just going to waste your energy worrying about it. So that's kind of my approach to competitions. Now, that being said, I am so glad I don't have to do a competition ever again in my life. So
that's always a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting to hear you say that you practice the last rounds first. I think that's a very good strategy. And I think people should adapt it more, because I definitely have seen people who are excellent in the first rounds and then can't play their concerto, and it happens a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think the first round is actually most difficult because there's the most people, and you have to stand out amongst 30, 40, 80 people. You have to make sure the judges remember you. Now, I don't want to advocate for like you doing something really crazy just so people can remember you. I think you should do things the way you think it should be done musically, being very genuine with your music making. But I think it's important to do things that are special for you, whether it's doing some ornaments in Bach that people don't usually do, or whether it's playing a piece that's, maybe by a well-known composer, but maybe a piece that people don't usually play so much. Or maybe it's how you put pieces one after another. Or, there's so many different ways to stand out and for them to remember. Obviously, if you play super well, you stand out that way too. But you also have to, make your musical statement. And that's, it's hard to know what your musical statement is when you're this young, with the students listening right now. But, there are certain pieces, I'm sure when you play, you go, yeah, this is my piece. I feel good when I play this piece, and those pieces, keep them in the back of your mind. When you're 18, when you're 24, that might be a piece you go back and bring back. And obviously you'll be better by then, but you will still feel that connection with that piece. And that's sort of how I felt about some of the stuff I played for Clyburn, was actually stuff I played a long time ago when I was a kid, and I brought back, and I had a lot of opinions about it.
Gotcha. Wow, that's very, very useful, I think, for people to know, to understand. Okay, so since we are already out of time, I'll give you one more question and then we'll wrap up. Okay, how's that sound? All right. So this person asked, he has a long username, so I'm not going to repeat that. But he said, to what extent can you deviate from a composer's marking in general? I think he heard us saying that you can deviate a little bit, but he's asking, to what extent can you deviate from it in general, in terms of dynamics, tempi, or even notes? So
simple way to put it, if you're still in school and doing competitions, don't do too much. Don't do it to a point where, if, let's say, and people like to add octaves in Chopin sometimes at the bass because his piano didn't go down that low. Okay, fine. I think depending on the situation, that's acceptable or not in a competition or at school. If you're playing Liszt, you want to add some octaves, I don't think he would have cared. If you're playing Beethoven, I don't know. Yeah, it depends. When you're out of school and you're performing and you're doing your own thing, you do whatever you want, You do what you think is proper and appropriate. And if that happens to be a crazy performance of something, you go ahead and do it. You're going to offend people, but as an artist, that's your voice. That's your prerogative to do something like that. If people don't like it, they don't like it. But when you're doing competitions and you're still in school, just be a little more conservative is what I would say. Tempi and stuff, there's certain things that are more flexible. Tempi, that's a little bit more flexible. Dynamics, you see a lot of times in Rachmaninoff, he writes hairpins. And you listen to him play, and he doesn't do that. It's more of a stretch, and he actually does a diminuendo on the top and then comes back down. But see, that if you do it like that, that's not really deviating so much as that's the style of Rachmaninoff, So you can deviate, I think, as long as it's appropriate stylistically, is my kind of academic answer. But my artistic answer is you do whatever you want. And if people don't like it, that's, it's your fault, but it's also their issue with it. So if you like it that way, you do it that way.
Gotcha. That got me actually curious. You're a composer yourself. Do you get offended if people don't do your markings?
Well, I haven't written that much stuff that other people play. I do mostly arrangements.
Gotcha. Would you feel offended if someone were to, if you wrote a hairpin there and people don't do it?
I think it depends. So because I'm a pianist and I play my own music, so I have an idea of what I think it should sound like. So I have a way I like how it sounds, but I think when you listen to someone else plays, the awesome thing is you hear it, somebody else's interpretation, how they hear it. So it's not only that you're hearing your piece, you're actually hearing it's like through a lens or like through a microphone. It's like there's an interpretation to it. So you get to hear them play. And it's almost like a different piece. I mean, it's not that it's in a bad way, but it's got a life of its own, So, do I prefer it the way I play it? Maybe. I mean, maybe I'll hear someone else play it that isn't the same way as I marked it, and I might like it better too. That's possible. And that happened to Rachmaninoff all the time with, when Horowitz played it, Rachmaninoff would go, I like that way better. I actually haven't heard too many people play my stuff. So luckily I haven't been put in that situation, but, maybe as my arrangements get played more in the future, that will start to happen. But I think in my experience playing with other composers, they are very free with their music. They're very rarely have I played something where the composer has been very specific about how this one thing should sound.
Understood. So it's more of an artistic choice sometimes. And
now, if you're counting stuff wrong, that's an issue. But
right.
You learn the wrong notes as an issue. That's not artistic license. That's just being sloppy. But yeah.
Gotcha. So do everything with a reason. Do everything with I guess integrity is
yes.
what you would suggest. Okay. Well, I think that should wrap it up. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your questions. Sean is a busy man. He's not only a famous pianist, but he is also a family man. He has his daughter to take care of, so we won't hold him here any longer. But
okay.
Just really, really appreciate you sharing your insight with us, with all of us, and
thanks
for coming
me.
on. Yeah, Piano Start Masterclass. And make sure if you guys want to check out Sean's performance and future schedules, go to his website at seanchenpiano.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
seanchenpiano.com.
And I will be streaming actually a half concert on Sunday afternoon through the violin channel. They've been doing streaming of all different types of music, not just violin music. So I'll be doing that 2 p.m. Central, I guess. I have to check, but it'll be up on Facebook.
Sunday afternoon.
Sunday afternoon. It'll be up on Facebook. You'll see it, and I'll be playing one of my arrangements. So if you want to tune in,
I'll definitely tune in.
I'd appreciate it.
People, please tune in to Sean and watch him. Right, and then just a couple of words about Piano Star Masterclass. If you want to be a performing student, go to our website, thepianoleague.com/masterclass. You can sign up for classes in May. We have an amazing lineup of teachers available. And be sure to watch our showcase. As I mentioned, I think we have 16 kids performing, and it's going to be awesome. And last but not least, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more piano content. And with that, we finish today's episode. So Piano Leaguers, happy practicing, and we'll see you next time. Bye. All right. And I usually play this video to finish.